I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. This is a show about our existence, our place in the world, what it all means, and ways to make it better. From big picture ideas that blow your mind to practical life advice, we explore it all. We amplify the voices of healers, survivors, mystics, disruptors, scientists, creatives, and everyday people like you and me to expand our consciousness and use that awareness to evolve into who we really want to be in the depths of our soul. Humans Amplified. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, please go rate and review the show, and remember to subscribe where you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Hey friends, research indicates that at least 70% of people in the US alone have experienced trauma. That means you've likely experienced trauma, and most of the people around you have too. Simply put, people need healing. I believe that as humans, we have the capability to alleviate the suffering that we all believe is so inevitable. But getting there starts with healing yourself first, with self-compassion, intentionality, time, and repetition. I have a free workshop to help with that. It's called Self-Healing the Root. It's a self-paced online version of some of the foundational work I do with my clients as a trauma-informed certified coach, and that I've also done to heal myself. It's designed to help you recognize and identify your specific nervous system responses and coping mechanisms to stressors. Then we build on that information to figure out the best ways you can regulate your specific nervous system responses when triggered. Then we create a plan that will help you integrate through action what you want for yourself instead. Healing these trauma responses can help you show up in the world more fully as who you really are. I want you to love who you are. And by the way, who you are is not your trauma or trauma responses. You can register for free at brandyfleckcoaching.com. Look for the free workshop option at the very top menu on the website. I'll put that link in the show notes if you're listening to the audio, or in the description of the video if you're watching on YouTube. But listen, this workshop is better suited for some than others, depending on where you're at in your trauma healing journey. Be sure to read the guidelines on the sign-up page before you register to help you decide if this workshop is for you. And if it is, I can't wait to see you there. Y'all, go ahead and grab your tissues now. Today we're talking to Cheyenne England about her miraculous healing journey. In late October 2020, at 38 years old, Cheyenne was diagnosed with stage 4B high-grade serous epithelial ovarian cancer. Cheyenne is not only a cancer survivor, but she's a mother, daughter, sister, aunt, friend, and teacher. She's been a teacher for 16 years in Tennessee, and she comes from a long line of strong women who have bravely fought cancer. I'll go ahead and tell you now that she's considered cancer-free after she went through 6 months, which included a debulking surgery and 6 rounds of chemo, followed by 2 years of a maintenance chemo pill. But with how her cancer had spread and her family history of cancer, the odds seemed stacked against her. As you listen to Cheyenne's story, you'll travel the ups and downs of emotions right there with her as she details what she experienced, from having to trust and advocate for herself when she thought something may be wrong, to a quick movement through the healthcare system, surgery, chemo, and at the same time, healing pieces of herself from her sister's previous death from breast cancer. After Cheyenne tells her story, she details for us the mental and emotional aspects of the journey, how she handled them, and what the absolute most important things were that helped with the healing process. This episode is as much about mindset as it is about what actually happened. And as you listen, you'll see how tiny things aligned in the right time to ensure that Cheyenne is here with us today. When you think about how everything had to come together in the way it did, it is nothing short of a miracle. Then and now, Cheyenne's greatest joy is her son, whom she's been blessed to travel with this year, celebrating life and going on adventures before he starts school. She says they're not really making up for lost time, but they are getting some good quality time in that they didn't get to have when she was going through this journey. It was different then, and you'll hear about that in this episode. Also, heads up, you'll hear Cheyenne's dogs barking through some of this interview because they totally wanted in on this inspiring episode. So let's dive in. For the links mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at humanamplified.com/episodes/108. What does being human mean to you?
Being human to me is a lot of different things. But the first thing is to just live. Like in church, we talk a lot about living like Jesus and loving like Jesus. And so I even asked my son, like, what does it mean to be human to you? And he's 5. And his answer was to be alive. So, to be alive, to live. And to me, that also means to just live life to the fullest, to experience everything that you can to help you become the best human you can, because, we want to live as much like Jesus as we can and to show others his love through our love. So that's kind of like the first thing that pops into my mind. And then the second thing that pops into my mind is actually from a show that my dad and I watched probably 20 years ago. I can't even find the show when I tried to find the quote again, but it was something to the effect that God gave humans free will that puts us just below the angels and right above the animals, because we're able to make those decisions and choose the things that happen or how we react to things in life. So when I read that question and I've heard that on your podcast, like those are the things that popped into my mind of living, loving, and having the free will to just choose what we want to do in our life.
Yes.
And how we respond.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I love that you brought up like the angels and the animals, because it just sort of like immediately tells us how spiritual you really are. And I feel like you live your life in a very spiritual way. Is that true?
Oh yes, very true. And it's something like when I was younger, we went to church, but I wouldn't say that I was as developed in like my beliefs and things. It was more just, gathering the information, and then as an adult trying to figure those things out. But it really wasn't until things happened in my life, which I know we're going to talk about on here, that really wound up helping me understand like what my spirituality is and my beliefs, and how those just have really helped guide me through my life and getting through situations and things that have happened, and just helping me learn how to respond, because I know what and where I want to go when I leave this earth.
And so you're coming from a Christian perspective, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one more little follow-up question before we dive in, because like your answer was just so rich. When you say to be the best human that you can be, what does that mean?
I think for me, that means kind of like what I talked about, we want to live and respond to things and love people the way that Jesus came and showed us to do. And so living a life like that, to me, that's our goal. Like understanding that we're sinners and that we should ask for forgiveness, but that we still get to try. We get to try again the next day, the next time, the next event that might have a response from us, that we need to, maybe be more patient or be more kind in situations. Like now at 41, almost 42, I think back a lot to like when I was a teenager, when I was in my 20s, and how I would respond to things, or how I would I would internalize it and just let it affect my life and my mood, how I was responding to people, when it really might not have even been someone else's fault, why I was in an angry mood. And now it's really gotten to where I can practice the pause. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to show, or I don't want to respond in a way that's going to reflect my emotions instead of who I am. Like in that moment, my emotions in that moment compared to who I really am and who I'm striving to be.
Ooh, I love that. Like, yeah, because we're not our emotions. Like, they're just
Right.
a thing that happens and we can use them as guides or something like that, but it's not who we are at the
Right.
core.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Instead of I've really tried to learn to be proactive instead of reactive. That was something in one of the schools that I taught in. It was a program that they used teaching kids to be proactive instead of reactive, and thinking through scenarios and how you can respond. And, you know, the things we teach kids are not just for kids, they're for adults too. And so that's something that I've kind of taken with me, is learning to recognize the emotions I might have in certain situations, or, you know, anxiety that I may be feeling, and how I know my anxiety response to certain things might be, so that I can go ahead and practice the pause, you know, recenter myself so that I'm ready to respond in a more loving way than I want my emotions to respond.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's great. A great point for our listeners. And before we get further, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I am 41, and I have been a teacher for the past 16 years. Initially, when I became a teacher, you know, I felt like that's what defined me. And as I've gotten older, I've I've realized that that's really more a part of me and not just who I am. For a long time, I was just shiny to my niece and nephew, who I absolutely adore. And then 5 years ago, I became mama to the sweetest little 5-year-old boy. And so I've always been very reflective. That's something that I actually really like about myself. It helps me in my job, it helps me in relationships, it helps me in just everyday life. But especially over the last 4 years, well, actually, more like 12 years, I guess, and we'll kind of get into that.
Okay.
I've become just more reflective on kind of like what we were talking about with being a human, like how I want to respond to things that happen to me in life, and how I want to let it affect me as I move through each day. Like, as I've gotten older, I don't want to have bad days. I don't want to be sad. So I can let myself have those feelings and recognize those feelings, and have my moments, and then I want to move on and be happy and enjoy the time that I have here on earth. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I've come to in my life right now.
Yeah.
Um, and then if I kind of back up just a smidge, I said I'm a teacher. I've taught for 16 years. This year would actually be my 17th year of teaching, but I was very fortunate to be able to take this year off and just spend it with my son.
Mm.
He will start kindergarten next year. And so after, going through life events that I've gone through, I felt like I had kind of missed some time with him that was very precious to me. And I was very blessed to have sold my house and been able to make a good amount of money that allowed me to take the year off from teaching and just completely spend it with him, traveling, going to discovery museums, going to different like events, and just making a lot of memories with him. So that's been very dear to me this year, to get to do those
Yeah.
things.
Gosh, that is so amazing. And I know I've seen some of your posts on Facebook and things like that of your adventures with him,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
been awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned sort of how you were able to make that happen. I feel like a lot of moms sort of wish they could do that, but there's a lot of fear around being able to like deal with the finances or how would I make it happen. So, um,
Right.
was was there anything else that you had to sort of create for yourself in order to make that happen emotionally or anything like that?
Teaching has been hard over the past several years, especially since COVID happened.
Hmm.
It's really changed what a classroom dynamic is like. And just all of the legislation that comes out and mandates that we have, it's made teaching really hard. It's been very different from what it was like when I first began teaching. And I knew that if I took the year off, I wanted to have a good headspace, that it still was something I want to come back to, that I wasn't going to be, one of the statistics of teachers right now that are just leaving the classroom, because I do love teaching. I love working with children. I love creating relationships with kids and being able to hopefully be a good role model for them. And so emotionally and mentally, I wanted to make sure that I was in a positive headspace, that I wasn't taking the year off to try to find something else to do. Like, I wanted to not worry about school. I wanted to literally make it a relaxing break, to allow myself to make memories with my son, but to also let myself heal in so many different ways that I didn't realize I needed to.
Mm.
Um, but then still have that positive, I can't wait to go back to school mentality. And it's been great, because I've truly been able to kind of take that out of my mind for this year and really immerse myself in everything that I'm doing with my son, and not be worrying about, do I really want to go back? Is this going to be, because I am excited to go back. And I'm even more excited that, it's worked out that I'm actually going to be moving into the school that my son will be going to next year. So I'll be teaching fifth grade at the school that he'll be starting kindergarten in. So, that those are little things that have like really just worked out and helped me be able to soak up every moment that we've had this year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And when it comes to sharing, I know that you've been like through a lot and you've got a pretty
Mhm.
miraculous survival story, I think.
Yeah.
Just taking as long as you need to, could you share your story with us?
Yeah. So, in 2020, um, we had been released from school early that year. So I had been able to stay home a little extra with my son. And I had decided that I wanted to have a sibling for him. And so I had started that process, and I was trying, and I kept thinking that, well, maybe it took, maybe I was pregnant again, because I was just very tired. And if anyone's ever been pregnant, pregnancy tired is way different than any kind of tired that you can ever have.
It
And
sure is.
so I was having those feelings, and I was just like, oh, I'm so excited, but I'm so exhausted. And then it wouldn't be a positive test. And fortunately, in the 2 months that I had tried, I started noticing other symptoms. And I think that I know that I was just, number one, super hyper aware of my body. And I've always really paid attention to any symptoms, signs, things that I knew were different going on in my body. And so I started noticing that I could feel something on my left side. Like, I could actually press on my left side and feel something there. And, other symptoms, I noticed that I was having to use the bathroom every 45 minutes. Within every 45 minutes, it couldn't wait. And I was having issues with having bowel movements. I finally was like, you know what? Now I can feel something on my side. I really think something's going on. So I contacted my OBGYN through their patient portal, which I love patient portals, being able to just send a message. And a nurse who I had not worked with, she didn't know my family history of cancers, and that I have a genetic mutation that makes me more susceptible to being positive for a cancer. I sent her all of my symptoms, and she sent me back a message that said it sounded like I just was having PMS symptoms, to take Tylenol and should be okay. And I said, no. So I contacted a nurse who had been my nurse when I was pregnant with Sawyer. I said, this is what's going on, and I know something is wrong. And that was like on a Monday. She had me scheduled for an ultrasound on the very next day. in the afternoon. I went and I had gone to my OBGYN for ever. Like, she wasn't just my OBGYN, she was a friend of my dad's. And so I went in the late afternoon and they did the ultrasound. And it was kind of funny because if you've ever had an ultrasound while you're pregnant, you kind of know what you're looking for. And in my mind, I was like, wow, that looks like I want to see a baby on the screen, but I see something else and it looks like it's something, but I don't know. I'm just going with the flow.
Yeah.
And I knew something was actually there when the tech says, "Are you supposed to talk to your doctor afterwards?" And I was like, no, I think she's probably will just call me. And she was like, "You know what? It's the end of the day. Let me see if she wants to just go ahead and, give you the stuff." And I was like, I text my mom and I said, "I think there's something wrong because they're going to have her come talk to me." And she did. And when she walked in, she told me that they could already see, like, they had measured it and everything, and that it was already, I think it was like 9 centimeter mass on my left ovary. And so they went ahead and did blood work. She went ahead and told me things that kind of like different options that I could have, that she knew it was going to need to be removed. And so she said we could go to like a general surgeon, or she could refer me to a gynecological oncologist. And she kind of ho-hummed about it, but she was like, "I'm just going to go ahead and send you to the gynecological oncologist." And so I was like, okay. So the very next day, I get a phone call to set that up, and it's for the following Tuesday. And in the meantime, they had drawn blood work, and they said this will give us an idea, if something's going on, because it amazes me the advances we have in medical technology, that they can draw blood and know specifically, what kind of a cancer you might have.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did that. And when I went the following Tuesday to meet this gynecological oncologist, she already had that blood work back. And with ovarian cancer, there's a tumor marker called the CA-125. And every female has this tumor marker. And if you're in a normal range, it's anywhere from 0 to 35. And mine was at like 600. And so the gynecological oncologist, she already knew that, but she would not tell me I had cancer. She kept telling me, "I will not tell you you have cancer, because we want to make sure that we have every possible data point to say this is what it is." She had my ultrasound, she had that blood work, but she wanted more. So that was a Tuesday. She schedules a CT for the following day on Wednesday, and she also did more blood work because since that's her specialty, she could pinpoint it a little bit more. And I did that on Wednesday, and she said, "Okay, I'm going to do a virtual phone call with you on Thursday." I was like, "Cool." And she knew that they were going to do surgery. We'd already talked about it. In my discussion with her on that Tuesday, when I was, more calm and able to talk with her, she talked a lot about preserving fertility, because she knew I had been trying to have a second baby. And I told her, you can take every bit of it. I have one healthy child, and there are other things I can do to have another child if that's deep down what I want to do, or deep down what God's plan is for me. But I want to live and be here for the child that I have. So she already had that in mind. I have the scan on Wednesday. She calls me on Thursday for our virtual visit. And it's funny because, there are certain times in your life you can remember every single detail of a moment that's happening. And on that Thursday, we had driven to Murfreesboro to meet my mom's friends for dinner. Me, my mom, and my son, who at the time was barely 2. He had just turned 2 in August. And my mom and my son went ahead and went into the restaurant while I took the phone call. I had driven, and she gets me on the phone, and she had already told me on Tuesday she was not going to diagnose me with cancer until They had done the blood work. They had removed it and biopsied it and everything. And in that conversation on that Thursday, she I still get verklempt about it. She told me that she knew it was cancer because it wasn't just on my ovary. It was on my spleen. It was in my intestines. It was on both sides of my urethra, which explained having issues with the bowels, having to use the restroom every 45 minutes. And so she made a different plan. And like, this is where I know that there was intervention from above, because I had my first ultrasound on a Tuesday with my gynecologist. I met the oncologist the very next week. On that Monday, she had me scheduled for surgery on that Monday. So in less than 2 weeks of me saying, hey, there's a problem, I know there's something wrong with my body, I was in an operating room having that cancer removed. And I just can't, I can never thank God enough for being able to see the path that he set up so long ago. Like my dad becoming friends with my OBGYN, which, you know, is kind of weird, but and knowing her for 20 years, her knowing my family history and everything that we had gone through and everything else, so that this wasn't one of those issues where it gets put off and it gets put off. And, you know, like a lot of times in medical, you have to wait a month for this and then another month for this. Like within 2 weeks, I can never stop praising how quickly I was able to have surgery. And the fact that my oncologist was in such close contact with my OBGYN. They told me later, like a year after I had been going through everything, that every time I had an appointment with either one of them, they were calling each other on their personal cell phones to relay any information about what was going on, or,
Wow.
you know, things like that. So it was just such a blessing. And when I had my surgery, the doctor, Dr. Nick, she's amazing, had told me it was going to go 2 ways. She was going to go in laparoscopically to make sure she could contain the cancer before she removed it. And if she did not feel she could do that successfully, that she would take the laparoscopic camera out and we would do chemo first and then have surgery, which that's not what I wanted to do. So I prayed and prayed and prayed. And when I went for my surgery, she asked me, you know, what was I hoping would be the outcome, that she would be able to go ahead and remove it all, or, you know. And I said, I'm really hoping that when you get in there, you can't find any cancer, because God's removed it from my body. Like, that's my hope. And so I could never stop singing her praises either, because she did not start the surgery. She rearranged people actually to be able to get me in that quick. My surgery was supposed to start at 4. I don't think I went back until like 7 or 8 p.m. that night. And I didn't get out of surgery until almost 2 a.m.
Wow.
And she was just so careful and meticulous about everything, because she knew my story coming in and like just what it meant to me. I mean, they say ovarian cancer is a silent killer because most of the time you don't recognize the symptoms, because they are symptoms that are put off as just PMS symptoms. And so I came out of surgery, and of course, going in, I didn't know, was she going to be able to remove it all, or was I going to have to come out and have chemo first? I wake up at 2 a.m. and my mom is standing there. Sorry. And she tells me that Dr. Nick was able to get all the cancer. Like, she had gotten all of it. And so, you know, I'm an emotional person anyways. And anesthesia makes it like 20 times worse. And so, like, I cried, but then I started basically singing hallelujah. And I vaguely remember this because when you're under it, but at 2 a.m. when they were rolling me to my room, my mom, and I do kind of remember this, every nurse that came in, every person who passed us in the hallway, I was shouting, raising my arms because I could raise my arms, telling everybody that God had saved me. God had saved me. He had healed me. They were able to get all the cancer out. And like, I feel like that moment is what really changed my life, really changed my heart. In a weird way, it's going to sound weird and it'll make sense in a little bit, but it's almost like it healed a part of my heart that needed healing from the loss that I had experienced before. Mm-hmm. Because my schema was that you have a cancer in my family and you possibly don't make it. And so that, that really set the tone for everything that I wound up going through. That was in November of 2020. And then in December, I started chemo. And the chemo was hard. And I talked about it a lot on my Facebook posts that I would share with people. But it was it was hard physically, but it was more difficult mentally because my body just reacted to the medicines. The side effects from the medicines were very intense for me. I had really bad bone pain. It was very hard to sleep for the first 3 days afterwards, which made it very hard to just be able to rest. And so anyways, going through those things mentally, being pushed to a point that you don't ever think you'll have to get to, and figuring out how to just push through it was hard, but rewarding in a way. Like I said, coming out of surgery and knowing that all the cancer was out of me just set the trajectory of how I looked at everything I had to face the rest of the time. I had the chemo treatments and, they got easier. I got finished with those. And I would say one of the most difficult things that I had to do was I had an issue towards the end where I had fluid on my spine and it affected my vision, and they didn't know what was going on. So they had to do different tests. And I had an MRI before, but I had never had a head MRI, and I didn't realize they strap your head to the table.
Oh.
And when I tell you I had to have an out-of-body experience listening to my, worship music while I was having that and just breathing through it, I came back when I was finally able to come back to school. I did this writing project with my kids about what is your superpower. And I said, my superpower is I've learned I can do hard things, because being completely terrified of needles and having to get poked as much as I've been poked in the past 4 years, having your head strapped to a table, I said, these are difficult things, but I have realized I can do them. I just have to get in the right headspace and it's okay. I'm good. And so, I truly believe that I became cancer-free the day I had surgery, because she was able to remove everything. In my biopsy results, like I said, it was on my spleen in my CT scan results that she had. When she got in there to do the surgery, apparently your spleen can grow an accessory spleen, which is just, anyways, she didn't have to remove my spleen. Yeah, she didn't have to remove my spleen. She was able to just remove that part of the spleen, or it was like a growth on the spleen. And so I didn't have that extra thing. She was going to just remove the tumors from my intestines because she thought they were just on the outside of them. But instead, she went ahead and did a resection. Well, when they did the biopsy, they realized the tumors had already gone into the intestines. So if she had just removed what she could see, there still would have been cancer in there. So it's all these little things that are like, they seem like tiny things that really wound up being big things that just completely healed me. And it's so weird to say that it really was one of the best experiences of my life, even though it was one of the worst experiences of my life too, just because how close I became with God, how my son was able to see my faith and see that praying can lead to miracles, and to just be able to show others that even though my schema said something bad could be the outcome, knowing all the things that we had gone through in our previous years, that something so beautiful came out of it. And now I've been able to take this year off and spend it with my son, and I feel like not necessarily get that precious time back, but it's a gift that I didn't think I would have, as he's 5 years old, and we're able to make so many cool memories together now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, Cheyenne, what a miraculous journey. And
Yeah.
it's all amazing. And the first thing that really stood out to me was that when somebody who didn't know your story told you, oh, it's just PMS symptoms, like you still
Yep.
trusted yourself enough to advocate
Yep.
for yourself and be like, no, something's not right. So, like,
Yeah.
just trusting yourself is huge, you know?
Yes. I've had so many conversations with people that I work with, or people who know me just because I'm in the education system in my county, who have said they were having symptoms, because I have been very vocal about paying attention to your body, but also advocating for yourself. Like, nobody knows what you feel in your body except for you. And
Mm-hmm.
if you feel like something's wrong, something could definitely be wrong. And I've had several people who have actually pushed with their doctors to get testing to just make sure things are okay. And thankfully they have been okay. But it's just been neat to hear the stories that other people have said just because they've heard my story,
Yeah.
to keep themselves healthy and safe.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So, can you describe for us a little bit the gamut of emotions you went through when from the time you found out that you had cancer until you realized you were cancer free? And I know that you sort of described it as a shift earlier when you were telling your
Mhm.
story, but what specifically was happening emotionally?
So, I've said that my schema is, in my family, you have cancer, you fight cancer, you pass away. And so when I say that, and because you've known me for a long time, but um, in 2012, when my sister had her second baby, 4 months after she had her, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she fought it for 2 years and passed away from it,
Yeah.
and left behind young children. And so when my doctor, when we had that video call, that's what was in my mind. That's why I was so adamant of, you know, do a full hysterectomy. I just want to be here for my child that's here, because I've already seen what losing a parent at a young child, or at a young age, how it affects children, not just personally, but also as a teacher. I've seen that. And so when she was able to go ahead and say that I had cancer, even though she hadn't done the surgery and biopsied everything, that was my immediate thought. And when I tell you Dr. Nick is like a saint, her bedside manner is impeccable. Like, people should study her, because she was so wonderful and patient. I can't tell you how long I was on the phone with her, and she was just so calm. And what I loved the most is she was so matter of fact, like, here are the facts. here's what our plan is. This is what our outcome is. These are what the studies are showing, that this treatment plan, extends the opportunity for reoccurrence to like not happen.
Mhm.
She was so calm in that moment, which really helped me. But as soon as she showed me she could pull up the CT scan and show me, like, which was great because I needed the visual. But as soon as she said it, the first thing that popped into my head was that I was going to leave a young child here. And, I'm a single mom. So it's not just, oh, he has a dad that he'll be with, and that's okay. No, it was like, my mom is the one who's here, and she's older. So, things happen in life. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, instant cry. Like, I couldn't speak. I'm one of those people that when I start crying, I like super crying. I can't talk. And she was just so wonderful. But I had my moment, and then it went into, this is happening to me, and this is what we need to do, because I'm not going to let this get me, or I'm at least not going to go out with a fight. And
Yeah.
so it's an hour drive from where we were at the restaurant back home. And in that hour, I was able to let my family and friends know what was going on and kind of what the plan was, that I was going to be having surgery. That was on a Thursday. I had to go in the next day and pretty much get my leave of absence from work, to all the stuff that you have to do for that. And again, it was a godsend. Having grown up in the county that I'm in, like, everyone has known me. I mean, my whole life, they knew my mom, they knew me. And so they were so wonderful to help me get everything set up the way that I needed to. And then it was just that shift of, okay, let's do this. Like, we're getting all of these things. My focus is on just taking it, looking at it head on. Like, that's the mentality that I had to have. I knew from, previous um, experience with my sister. My mom had cancer in the early 2000s also. So I knew that I just needed to constantly be looking ahead and like, okay, I'm going to push myself to get through the surgery, and I'm going to go ahead and push myself to get up and walk around, because then each day it'll get easier. And same thing with chemo. So I let myself have that, super upset moment. I let myself have the moments that I needed to have when I needed them. But I also just kept that focus of, okay, here's one day closer to being done with chemo. Here's one day closer to being done with my maintenance pill that I had to take. Here's one day closer to being able to move around easier and have my strength. And it's just been that constant, okay, I did this today, tomorrow it's going to be even easier kind of mentality.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing you say like you felt your emotions and they were
Oh yeah.
there,
Yeah.
but like you were somehow able to let them pass and then focus on what you needed to do, sort of like that survival instinct kicked in, would you say?
Yes. At the time also, my father had dementia. So he didn't really, I wouldn't say he didn't know me, but he knew I was something to him. And because it was COVID era, the place that he was living at had very strict protocols. They weren't letting people come in. All I knew was that if I was going into surgery, I needed to see my dad at least one more time.
Mm.
And they were wonderful too. I contacted them, told them what was happening, and I said, please let me just come get a hug from my dad. And of course, I had to have all the PPE stuff on, and he would not have recognized me anyways. But being able to have that, being able to get all of those things done from Friday to Monday when I had surgery, and get to love on my loved ones. I was able to see my niece and nephew before I had surgery. They had no idea what was going on. It was just, we got to see each other, and not as a goodbye, but just as a motivator to be able to see and hug and love all of my family and everyone. It was great. And it really helped me be like, okay, this is what I'm fighting for. Like, I'm fighting to continue to get to do this, to see all of them and love on them and hug them and everything. So,
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And so as you're describing this experience, like you can tell that you're very close to your family and your loved
yeah,
ones, and it's so
yeah,
important to you. And you were really close to your sister as well, who you mentioned.
yes,
And I
yes,
knew her as well. Gosh,
yes,
she was so amazing. Like,
yes.
has this experience, even though she has passed away, has it brought you closer to her in any way?
I feel like I feel like it. I feel so. Yes, to answer the question, when she was going through her journey, we talked a lot about what she was feeling, what she was afraid of, what all of the emotions that you could possibly have, and it it brought us closer because I feel like we were able to. I was able to finally understand probably the things that she didn't talk about with me, the worries that you have when you're thinking about your kids and your friends and your just your family. But it was also one of those things like, you know, my sleep was really messed up after I had my surgery or when I would have chemo. So I'd be wide awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would just kind of lay there and talk to her and ask for guidance, um, or peace or, anything. Because I went through it during COVID, we were not allowed to have people come with us when we had our treatments, which was
Yeah.
another really hard thing to go through mentally. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times I would just lay there and have my eyes closed and basically be talking to her and God. Like, I could just picture them side by side, like watching over me. And um, it just, I don't know, I feel like it kind of gave me a peace that I needed of coming to terms, like understanding where my sister was in her journey. I of course, the whole time wished I could have actually physically talked with her,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that really the whole experience sounds like I don't want to say forced, but it opened up an opportunity for you to really have to pull on like these spiritual, emotional, and mental reserves that you had
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Yeah. What would you say were the most important factors that helped you heal in all the ways?
Ooh, I would say spiritually, like I said, in every single moment that I was awake and not talking to someone, I pretty much was praising him. I had multiple little devotionals that people had brought me that I would read each day. And some of them were on healing, and some of them were, on facing challenges. And it was always like whatever was for that day was for me. Like, it just, truly always spoke to me. So spiritually, I was just always praying. And if I had like if I was reading something in my Bible or reading those devotionals, like, I would be talking about it. I would talk about it with my mom, which my son was only 2 at the time, so he didn't really know as much about it, but he got to hear us talking about it. I had friends who were very spiritual who would come over. I had coworkers who would come over and pray with me before I had chemo because, they would pray specific things, and when two or more are gathered, you know, and so that helped me spiritually through that. Emotionally, having my mom there with me, we lived together. So she was my caretaker, but she was also taking care of my son. And she had been through her own journey with cancer, like I said, early 2000s. And then she'd also been through it with my sister. And so she knew how I felt the emotions that I was feeling and how they were justified in that. So having her there helped me emotionally to be able to talk through that. Physically, I went from being like very social, going to things all of the time, to having to actually rest, which was not something that I was used to, but getting to like the headspace of it really is okay. Like just just sleeping, just laying here, chilling is actually healing me. And so that was hard to chemo basically wipes you wipes you completely clean. I mean, and so I always said it's kind of like if you have an internal battery. It took my battery down to 0 and I had to slowly build it back up. It's not fully charged yet. It's still not fully charged, just still recovering. But physically, that's kind of where it was. And it was just pushing myself each day to get up and walk around the house, to get up and walk outside when it got nicer. So,
I don't know if it's possible, but if I distilled what you're saying down into one word, would it be support?
oh yeah, 1,000%. Between my friends, my family, just even, it's kind of crazy too that my son was only 2 at the time, and anyone who's ever had a toddler or been around a toddler knows how wild and rambunctious they can be. And he was so gentle, and just him understanding that he could come sit beside mommy, but mommy couldn't like pick him up or things like that was like the medicine that I needed anyways. Just to be able to snuggle with him helped me feel so much better.
If you could go back to little Cheyenne, like maybe the favorite year of your childhood, and tell her anything based on what you know now, what would you say?
It's all going to be okay. Every moment in my life, whether it's been good or bad, has helped prepare me for who I am and who I'm going to be. And all of those things, whether they were happy or sad, have helped me be prepared. Losing my sister helped give me the motivation to do whatever it took to get healthy and be here for my son. And so I think I would just tell myself it's all going to be okay. Like everything is going to work out according to God's plan. And if I just believe fully in Him and what He has planned for me, then it's all going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay.
I love that. Okay. All right. And is there anything that we didn't get to talk about today that you think is important to share?
Ooh. I think that anytime you're going through something, having a positive attitude is going to make all of the difference in the outcome. A long time ago, I read the book The Secret, and I know it's become a movie and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when I read it, I was in my like mid 20s, I think, and it didn't hit as much with me as it does now. Like I said before, I'm very reflective, and so different things pop in my head. But I get that now whenever they talk about, speaking into existence kind of what you want to happen or hope to happen, and just keeping that positive mentality, because if you're focusing on those things, it kind of just guides you. You start to see the good in what's happening. Like it was not fun having chemo, but I knew that in the end of my journey with that part of cancer, that it was going to be doing its job, and it did its job. I've been cancer free ever since then. I don't even have anxiety when I go to my oncologist anymore, which is wonderful. I know, because I knew my body before, and I know it now, and I know that it's gonna my results are gonna be fine every time. So it's just keeping that positive attitude is what's I feel like has really helped me. And then of course advocating and knowing your body, like
Mm.
not letting things, if you're like, man, I've really been tired lately, there's probably a reason. If getting sleep is not helping you, there's probably something else. I think if that's something that I can help people see, is keeping that positive attitude and just taking one day at a time. It's kind of like I was talking to my mom the other night when they say, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." Like, you
Mm,
can reach the big goal in those little steps with a positive attitude.
yeah, I totally agree. And real quick, how do you keep a positive attitude when you're going through challenges like you have?
I think for me, it's just been reflecting on the things that have happened in my life, losing my sister and losing my dad and seeing the outcomes from those things. Those were sad times, and I've lived through sad times when I first lost my sister, and I know that that's not how they would want me to live, being sad. And so, even in my own time, especially now that I have my son, like, I just realized time is so precious. Like, my love language is quality time.
Mm,
And I don't want to spend my quality time with people being sad or angry or grumpy. And so, kind of like I said before, I let myself have those emotions and then I just move on because life is way too short to not just be ready to be happy and ready to soak up those moments. You know, when we're gone, what's left behind are the memories and the photos with our friends and our loved ones and our family. And the best thing that we can do is to be happy and be 100% in those moments to make those memories. And just when I'm gone, I want my son to remember a happy mom that was in tune and there making the memories and with him.
yeah, that's beautiful. It really is.
Yes.
Cheyenne, if our listeners want to learn more about you, is there a way they can do that?
I've actually when I began the year, I I decided I wanted to kind of make this year about um uh the adventure. And so I had a friend create a logo for me that says Shiny Adventures. And I actually have an Instagram and a Facebook that is Shiny Adventures. I haven't really posted as much because I've just kind of been gathering the content from this year. But I'm hoping to, now that we're getting closer to, school doesn't start until August, but I have content that I can share from the year and maybe even like tidbits and tips and motivation for people who want to, check that out. They could check out Shiny Adventures and just kind of see like how to live life in a positive, happy way and just
Yeah.
soak up those moments.
Okay. Beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
I'll be sure to check those out and put all that in the show
Okay.
notes for our
Yeah.
listeners. And
Yeah. Cool.
Cheyenne, thank you. Thank you for
Yes. Thank
sharing.
you. Absolutely. Thank you for letting me come on here. I love this.
Thanks for tuning in. Check out more of our episodes here and at humanamplified.com. Remember to subscribe.